Have you ever stayed in a hotel and suddenly felt like you weren't alone? Not because you saw a ghost, not because someone knocked on your door, just a feeling, the kind that makes you check the bathroom, then the closet, then the space underneath the bed. Because hotels are strange places. You sleep in rooms where hundreds of strangers have slept before you. You don't know who was there. You don't know what happened there. And sometimes, you don't know who might still be there. Tonight, I'm going to tell you 3 disturbing hotel stories based on reported experiences. Some of them have explanations, some don't. But all 3 have one thing in common. The guests thought they were alone. They weren't so sure by the time they left. Story 1. The Cheap Room. In 2016, a woman traveled with her parents and younger brother to Hong Kong. They needed somewhere to stay for several days. Her mother found a surprisingly cheap deal at a 4-star hotel. It wasn't their first time staying in that area, and the hotel itself wasn't supposed to be frightening. It was simply a good deal, so they booked it. Nothing seemed wrong when they arrived. The lobby looked normal. The staff behaved normally. They got their room and went to bed. At first, everything was completely ordinary, but during the night something changed. The woman began noticing strange things inside the room. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would immediately make you run out of a hotel. Just little things. Things that made her wonder whether she had imagined them. The kind of things you dismiss because you're tired. But the longer she stayed there, the harder they became to ignore. Her family members also began having their own strange experiences. And that was what made the situation disturbing. Because if only one person experiences something strange, you can blame exhaustion, a dream, a misunderstanding. But when different people begin noticing unexplained things independently, you start wondering, maybe it isn't just your imagination. The family eventually left the hotel. The woman later described the experience as something she still found frightening to think about. And that's what makes this story so unsettling. There wasn't one giant monster standing at the end of the hallway. There wasn't a dramatic jump scare. It was the opposite. It was the feeling that something was wrong, while everything around you looked completely normal. And honestly, that's probably the worst kind of hotel horror. Because when you see a monster, you know what you're afraid of. But when you don't know what you're afraid of, your imagination does the work for you. Story 2. Someone was already in the room. This next story isn't about a ghost. And that's what makes it even more disturbing. In 2026, a hotel guest described checking into an inexpensive hotel in the United States. He opened the door to his assigned room and immediately discovered something that should never happen. Someone was sleeping in the bed. A complete stranger. He hadn't invited anyone. He hadn't shared the room. And yet, someone was already inside. He went straight back to the front desk. He told the manager what had happened. And according to his account, the explanation was almost unbelievable. The person in the room was apparently someone who had failed to check out. The hotel had been trying to get her to leave. And somehow, the room had been assigned to a new guest anyway. Think about that. You arrive at a hotel after traveling. You're tired. You just want to close the door, put your bag down and sleep. You unlock your room. You walk inside, and there's already someone sleeping in your bed. The guest was given another room. He opened that door and found a completely different problem. The room hadn't been properly cleaned. Trash was everywhere. The sheets were on the floor. The room smelled of cigarettes. So he went back to the front desk again. At this point, he wasn't just annoyed. He was uncomfortable, because the first room had contained a stranger, and the second room looked like nobody had properly checked it. Eventually, he pushed for a refund. But imagine what would have happened if he hadn't turned on the light. What if he'd simply walked into the room at midnight, dropped his luggage, locked the door, and gone straight to sleep? He might not have discovered that someone else was there until much later. And that's the frightening thing about hotels. When you enter a room, you assume the hotel has checked everything. You assume the room is empty. You assume you're safe. But sometimes, you don't actually know who was there before you. And you definitely don't know whether everyone has really left. Story 3. The voice in the bathroom. This one happened recently. A man was staying in a hotel with his girlfriend. They had been drinking earlier that night. Eventually, his girlfriend decided to leave early because she needed to catch a bus. He was too drunk to go with her, so she left. He stayed behind. The room became completely quiet. He was lying on the bed, half asleep, staring at the ceiling. The bathroom was only a few steps away, and then he heard her voice, coming from inside the bathroom. At first, he wasn't frightened. He assumed she had come back. Maybe she'd forgotten something. Maybe she had returned without him noticing. So he listened. The voice sounded exactly like hers. Not similar. Not vaguely familiar. According to his account, it sounded exactly like her. She was saying things that sounded like normal conversation, asking him questions, talking to him, trying to get his attention. But something felt wrong, because he knew she had left. He knew she wasn't supposed to be there. And then the voice changed. It became stranger, more playful, more unsettling. The room was silent except for that voice coming from the bathroom. He didn't immediately open the door. Instead, he stayed where he was, listening, trying to understand what was happening. Was someone inside? Had his girlfriend somehow returned? Was he hallucinating because of the alcohol? Or was something else happening? Eventually, the experience became disturbing enough that he couldn't ignore it. He described the incident afterward as something he genuinely couldn't explain. And here's the part that gets me. Imagine you're lying alone in a hotel room at night. You're half asleep. The bathroom door is only a few feet away. And suddenly, you hear the voice of someone you trust. You hear them calling you. You know they're supposed to be gone. But the voice is coming from behind the bathroom door. What would you do? Would you open it? Or would you stay completely still and hope whatever is inside eventually stops talking? Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't hearing a strange voice. It's hearing a familiar voice, coming from somewhere it shouldn't be. Hotels are supposed to be temporary homes. You check in, you sleep, you wake up, you check out, and you forget about the room. But every once in a while, something happens that makes you remember that room forever. Maybe it was a sound. Maybe it was a stranger. Maybe it was something you couldn't explain. Or maybe the room really was empty, and your mind simply couldn't accept what it heard. So the next time you stay in a hotel, before you turn off the lights, look around, check the bathroom, check the closet, and maybe, just maybe, don't look under the bed, because sometimes the room isn't as empty as you think.